Chapter 1. Poppy. Of all the ways to die, I never figured death by carnation would be mine. But as I watched the spray of offensively bright, Pepto-Bismol pink flowers arc through the air in a perfect, horrifying slow-motion tragedy, I knew my life was over. It was the trip. It was always the trip. My entire life has been a series of spectacular fumbles, a Rube Goldberg machine of minor disasters. But this was my masterpiece. One moment I was shuffling down the aisle of St. Jude's Cathedral, crushed under the weight of a funeral wreath so large it could double as a parade float. My arms burned. My vision was obscured by baby's breath and the heel of my left shoe. My one pair of respectable black pumps, bought on clearance, was wobbling like a drunk sailor. The next moment, that same heel snagged on the plush crimson runner, and I was airborne. I didn't just fall. I launched. I catapulted the wreath end over end directly toward the open casket. The silence that fell wasn't just silence. It was a vacuum. A black hole that sucked all the air, all the light, and all the mumbled our deepest condolences from the most terrifying collection of Italian men in tailored black suits I had ever seen. The wreath, the wrong wreath, I realized with a fresh, gut-lancing spike of panic, landed with a soft, sickening thud directly on the chest of the late Dawn. Scarpa, or Scavo, or something S that meant danger. And then the flowers, loosed from their wire prison, tumbled free. Not the solemn, respectful white lilies I had meticulously and expensively sourced. Not the arrangement that said, "Our sincerest regrets for your loss." Number. This was the other order. The one for Crystal's Sweet 16 party. A garish, joyful, celebratory explosion of pink carnations, neon yellow daisies, and glitter-dusted greenery. They cascaded over the Don's chest, bounced off his waxy, folded hands, and settled in a cheerful, mocking pile right next to his ear. A bright pink ribbon emblazoned with "Happy Birthday, Crystal" landed across his forehead. I lay face down on the runner, my cheap black dress hiked up to my thighs and a sprig of fern stuck in my hair. I squeezed my eyes shut, praying for a swift, painless death. Maybe an aneurysm, or a stray bolt of lightning from the angry Catholic god I was currently offending. This cathedral was big enough. He had plenty of room to take aim. "Get her up." The voice was a low growl, laced with such venom that it vibrated through the floor and into my jaw. I didn't move. I couldn't. I was paralyzed, a possum playing dead in the headlights of a very expensive armored-plated truck. My business, Poppy's Petals, was already a financial sinkhole, surviving on payday loans and my dwindling hope. This lawsuit, or the hitman, or whatever came next, would be the final nail in my floral-scented coffin. A heavy hand gripped my upper arm and yanked me to my feet. I stumbled, nearly falling again, and found myself staring at a wall of black silk. No, not a wall. A man. He looked like a minor mountain range, and his eyes were chips of obsidian. "What is the meaning of this?" he hissed. I opened my mouth, but all that came out was a high-pitched squeak. I flapped my hands uselessly like a seal trying to explain quantum physics. There was a mix-up. The van, 2 orders, the lilies are in the van. I tripped. And Crystal's party. This is Dawn. I'm so sorry. I was going to be sick. Right here. On the expensive, hand-cobbled shoes of the man who was surely 100% going to murder me. The man, the mountain, looked past me, toward the casket. His face, already pale, turned the color of ash. "Boss," he whispered, stepping aside as if I were suddenly radioactive. And that's when I saw him. He was sitting in the front pew, not 6 feet from the glitter-bombed casket. I knew who he was. Everyone in this city knew who he was. Even a perpetually broke florist who lived on ramen and anxiety knew. Dante the executioner Moretti. He didn't just run the city. He owned the shadows it cast. He was beautiful in the way a panther is beautiful. All sleek, controlled power, and the promise of a violent death. His suit was impossibly black, tailored so perfectly it looked sewn onto his skin. His hair was a dark, perfect shadow, and his face was carved from marble. Cold, impassive, and utterly terrifying. My breath hitched. The blood drained from my head, and the cathedral began to tilt. This wasn't just a Mafia funeral. This was the funeral of Dante Moretti's main rival. The man he'd supposedly been at war with for a decade. And I had just turned it into a clown show. A younger man beside Dante, probably his cousin, shot to his feet, his face purple with rage. "You stupid bitch! You desecrated him! You dash dash!" Dante didn't even look at him. He just lifted one long-fingered hand, a casual, almost lazy gesture, and the man's words choked off instantly. Slowly, deliberately, Dante Moretti rose to his feet. He was taller than I thought, leaner. The silence in the cathedral was so profound, I could hear the wax melting on the altar candles. He walked to the casket, his footsteps silent on the stone. I was dead. My flower shop would be a pile of ash by nightfall. My landlord would evict my cat, Barnaby. It was all over. He stopped. He looked down at the rival Dawn, buried in a pile of aggressively cheerful pink. He tilted his head. His eyes traced the happy birthday crystal ribbon, tickle ribbon, which had settled jauntily over the corpse's left eyebrow. I held my breath, waiting for the gunshot. And then, the impossible happened. Dante Moretti laughed. It wasn't a chuckle. It wasn't a snort. It was a deep, rich, genuine laugh that echoed off the vaulted ceilings. It was the most shocking, terrifying, and, God help me, sexiest sound I had ever heard. Every suit in the room stiffened. The man beside me looked like he was about to faint. The woman in the black veil across the aisle made a sound like a strangling cat. Dante turned, his eyes, not cold now, but lit with a dark, terrifying amusement, and they landed directly on me. He looked me up and down. My tangled, humidity-frizzed red hair, my smudged cheek where I'd hit the floor, the fern sticking out over my ear, my trembling, useless hands still dusted with glitter. "I hated that bastard," he said, his voice a smooth, gravelly baritone that vibrated straight down my spine and pooled somewhere low and hot in my stomach. My jaw dropped. He gestured to the casket, a small, cruel smile playing on his perfect mouth. "He always did have shit taste. This is an improvement." The furious cousin sputtered. "Dante, this is a mockery." "Our respects." "Your respects." Dante's gaze snapped to him, and the amusement vanished, replaced by an arctic chill that froze the air. "You've been skimming from his ports for 6 months, Nico." "Don't talk to me about respect." Nico turned a pasty, sickly white. Dante's eyes returned to me. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. It was like being pinned by a spotlight, and I was the terrified, clumsy rabbit. He took a step closer, and I had the insane, primal urge to either curtsy or bolt. He reached out and, with a terrifying, unhurried gentleness, plucked the fern from my hair. He studied it for a moment, rolling the delicate green stem between his thumb and forefinger. "You're a clumsy disaster?" he observed. It wasn't an insult. It was a statement of fact. Yes," I whispered, my voice cracking. "Sir, Mr. Moretti, I am so sorry. I'll clean it up. I'll get the lilies. They're in the van. It's free. Everything is free. Please don't kill me." That dark, dangerous smile returned. It lit his face, transforming him from a beautiful statue into a devastatingly handsome predator. "Kill you," he mused, as if considering it. Why would I kill the only person who's made me laugh all year? He looked over his shoulder at the mountain man who had picked me up. Marco. Pay her. Boss? Marco looked profoundly confused. For this, Dante confirmed, and pay off her shop's debt. My brain stopped working. The room spun. What? My debt. How do you even... Dante's gaze held mine, silencing me. My mother's anniversary is next week. She hated lilies. She liked color. He gestured vaguely at the pink and yellow desecration. You'll be handling the arrangements. I will? Yes. He took another step, closing the distance between us. I had to crane my neck to look up at him. I was 5'4". He was well over 6 feet of lean, coiled muscle. I could smell him. Expensive cologne, starch, and something metallic. Gunmetal. It seems I'm in need of a new florist. And I've decided I'm keeping you. Keeping me, like a stray kitten or a lucky penny. But, I gestured weakly to the other side of the aisle, where a group of people who I assumed were the actual grieving family were staring at me with expressions of pure, unadulterated hatred. The woman in the black veil looked like she was mentally skinning me alive. The Scarpas, I ruined their funeral. They won't touch you, Dante said. It wasn't a reassurance. It was a command, a declaration of ownership. He turned to Marco. Take her. Get the right flowers out of her van and put them in the hearse. We'll finish this farce. And then bring her to the house. Wait! I yelped as Marco's hand clamped on my arm again, this time with a possessive finality. Mr. Moretti, wait. I have a cat. And orders. I have a life. Dante paused at the pew, turning to look at me over his shoulder. The amusement was gone. His eyes were dark, possessive, and absolute. They stripped me bare, right there in the aisle of St. Jude's. No, he said, the words cutting through the silence. You don't. You have a new job.
Chapter 2. Dante. The drone of the priest's voice was a scalpel scraping against my skull. A pillar of the community. A man of faith. A devoted family man. I resisted the urge to scoff. Don Angelo Scarpa had been a pillar of nothing but greed. His faith was in offshore accounts, and the only thing he was devoted to was his own ego. He was a gluttonous, sentimental fool who'd gotten sloppy, and sloppy men end up in expensive boxes, listening to lies. I sat in the front pew, a mask of bored indifference carved onto my face. Beside me, my cousin Nico shifted, his cheap suit rustling. He was sweating, the fat idiot. He actually believed this performance of respect mattered. He thought showing up here, playing the part of the grieving rival, would solidify our position. He understood nothing. Power isn't taken by playing dress-up. It's taken by dismantling your enemies piece by piece until nothing is left but silence. Angelo Scarpa was the last piece, and now he was gone. This funeral was a formality, a tedious final piece of paperwork. I'd been staring at the crucifix, counting the seconds until I could leave, when the commotion started at the back of the cathedral. A scuffle, a muffled yelp, and then her. She didn't just walk in, she imploded. It was a cascade of flailing limbs, red hair, and a truly offensive amount of baby's breath. She tripped, and for a split second, she was gloriously, ridiculously airborne. And then, the wreath. When it hit the casket, the thud was obscene. But it was the flowers, the explosion of pink, the glitter, the daisies, that broke the tension. I watched, stunned, as a ribbon proclaiming "Happy Birthday, Crystal" sailed through the air and slapped the dead Don directly across his waxy, arrogant face. Silence. The kind of absolute breathless vacuum that precedes an execution. Nico, true to form, leapt to his feet. "You stupid bitch!" he roared, his face a blotchy purple. He was always so dramatic. I lifted a hand. He shut his mouth, choking on his own predictable rage. I stood. Every eye in the cathedral was on me, including the Scarpa family, their faces masks of performative grief that had curdled into genuine hatred. They expected retribution. They expected me to be insulted by this circus. I walked to the casket. I looked down at Angelo. He looked absurd. A pig in a pink blanket. A joke. And I laughed. The sound was ripped from my chest, sharp and real. It echoed, bouncing off the saints in the stained glass. It had been years since I'd laughed like that. Marco, my most trusted man, looked like he was having a stroke. Good. It was good to keep them on edge. I turned and my eyes found her. She was a mess. A beautiful, terrified, spectacular mess. She was all tangled red hair, the color of a fox. Her dress was hiked up, showing a pale, trembling thigh. Her eyes, a bright, panicked green, were wide, and her face was smudged with dirt. A sprig of fern was stuck in her hair like a broken antenna. She was a stray cat, cornered and expecting a boot, but still vibrating with a frantic, chaotic energy. In my world, everything was deliberate, controlled. Every word, every move, every alliance was a calculated step in a blood-soaked chess game. This girl, she was a thrown brick. She was a grenade made of glitter and bad luck. And she had, in one clumsy moment, done what I couldn't. She'd delivered the perfect final insult to Angelo Scarpa. She'd turned his solemn, reverent funeral into the exact farce his life had been. "I hated that bastard," I said, the words cutting through the silence. I saw her jolt, her green eyes widening further. "He always did have shit taste. This is an improvement." I dismissed Nico's pathetic sputtering. My focus was on her. This, Poppy. Even her name sounded like a burst of color. She was apologizing, her voice a reedy whisper. "Please don't kill me." The thought was amusing. She thought I was the one to fear in this room. She was right, of course, but not for this. "Kill you," I mused. "Why would I kill the only person who's made me laugh all year?" An idea, sharp and sudden, took root. This place, my home. It was a fortress. It was gray steel, black marble, and soundproofed glass. It was a tomb. My mother had been the last person to put flowers in it. Dead, wilting roses on the day she died. I hadn't allowed a single plant inside since. It was too loud. Too much life. Until now. Now I looked at this chaotic creature, this walking disaster, and I wanted to see what she would do to my sterile world. I wanted to see her spill her color all over my gray, pay off her shop's debt. I ordered Marco. Her confusion was a tangible thing. My what? My debt? She didn't know I'd had her file pulled the second Marco whispered her shop's name. Poppy's petals, drowning in debt, 1 bad month from bankruptcy. Easy. My mother's anniversary is next week, I told her, moving closer. She smelled like rain, soil, and something sweet. Freesia. She hated lilies. She liked color. I was right in front of her now. She was so small, and I was so not. She trembled, but she didn't back down. She held my gaze, her terror warring with a flicker of something else. Defiance. She was a weed pushing through concrete. "I'm keeping you," I said. The words were possessive, final. I saw her bristle. "Good." "But the Scarpas, I ruined their funeral." She was worried about the wrong wolves. "They won't touch you." I'd make sure of that. Angelo's widow, Serafina, was looking at me, her eyes promising murder. Let her. She was a snake with no fangs, and I'd just declared this little rabbit mine. The drive back to the mansion was quiet. Marco drove, his eyes meeting mine in the rearview mirror once, his expression unreadable. I'd given him the order. The girl was following in a separate car with 2 of my men. For her protection, I leaned my head against the cool, bulletproof glass. My black marble fortress was waiting. When I'd had it built after my father's death, I'd wanted it empty. I'd wanted no attachments, no weaknesses, no color, no clutter, no life. Life was weakness. Life was what my father had, with his mistresses and his loud parties, and it had gotten him a bullet in the throat. Life was what my mother had, with her garden and her paints, and it had gotten her a broken heart that eventually just stopped. I chose control. I chose silence. The house was a monument to it. Silent staff, gray walls, furniture so modern it was uncomfortable. It was a mausoleum, and I, its king. But as the car swept through the high-security gates, the silence of the place suddenly felt oppressive. It felt dead. I'd stepped out of the car and was halfway up the grand, floating marble staircase when I heard the commotion at the door. "I will not. You can't just abduct me. I have a cat. His name is Barnaby, and he needs his wet food. Let go of me, you. You Armani-clad Sasquatch." I paused, one hand on the steel railing. I turned. Marco was dragging her through the foyer. She was fighting him, which was both incredibly stupid and deeply fascinating. She was trying to dig in the heels of her one good shoe, her arm wrenched by his massive grip. "Marco," I said. My voice was quiet, but it cut through her shrieking. Everything stopped. Marco froze. She froze, her chest heaving, her face flushed with rage. She looked even more of a mess now. Her hair was wild, a fiery halo around her head, and her eyes were bright with angry, terrified tears. "Let her go," I said. Marco dropped her arm as if it were on fire. She stumbled, rubbing her elbow. She looked at me, standing 10 feet above her on the stairs, and her chin came up. That flicker of defiance. "You can't do this," she said, her voice shaking but gaining strength. "This is kidnapping." "This is a job offer, miss." I trailed off, feigning ignorance. "Pedal. Poppy pedal. And don't lie to me. You don't offer jobs by dragging people out of cathedrals." "A technicality," I said, descending the stairs slowly, one by one. I watched her eyes track me, watched her swallow as I came closer. "You were in danger. The Scarpas are not forgiving. You are now, by association with me, a target." "By association?" "You're the one who laughed. You're the one who said you were keeping me." And I am. I reached the bottom step, then the floor. I was only a foot from her now. She had to crane her neck, and I relished the way her pulse hammered in the delicate, pale skin of her throat. "I've paid your debts," I said, my voice low. "All of them. The loans for Poppy's petals, the back rent on your apartment, your student loans. You are, for the first time in your adult life, completely solvent." Her mouth opened, then closed. She stared at me, her mind clearly racing, trying to process the number. You paid in full. You now work for me. You will live here. Your cat, Barnaby, will be retrieved and brought here. You are not a prisoner, Miss Petal. You are an employee, my personal florist." She was shaking her head, bewildered. "But why?" "For that mess?" I allowed myself a small smile. That mess was the most honest thing that's happened in this city all year. I despise liars, Miss Petal, and I am surrounded by them. I looked around the vast, empty, gray foyer. It was cold. So cold. "This place," I said, more to myself than to her. "It's dead." I turned my gaze back to her, to the bright, messy, living color of her. "Your job," I said, "is to fix it. Fill it with life. Fill it with color." I gestured to the entire echoing mausoleum. She looked around, her eyes wide, taking in the sterile marble and cold steel. She looked back at me, her expression a mix of terror and something I couldn't quite place. "You want me to put flowers in this?" "I want you to try." I leaned in, dropping my voice so only she could hear, savoring the way she flinched, but didn't retreat. "Try not to break any priceless sculptures while you're at it." "But if you do," I shrugged, "at least it won't be boring." I turned and walked away, leaving her standing in the center of my cold, empty world, a single, vibrant splash of chaos. "Marco," I called over my shoulder, "show Miss Petal to the East Wing, and get the cat."
Chapter 3. Poppy. I woke up to the sound of silence. Not the normal kind of silence like my apartment at 3 a.m., which was really just a mix of sirens, my refrigerator's death rattle, and Barnaby snoring. This was a thick, heavy, expensive silence, the kind that's manufactured. I opened my eyes. The ceiling was about 20 feet high. The room was painted a shade of gray, so pale it was almost white, but completely devoid of warmth. I was lying in a bed so large it felt like I was on a separate continent from the other pillow. The sheets weren't just soft. They were liquid. They felt like they were woven from clouds and money. Oh, God! It all came rushing back. The funeral. The pink carnations. Crystal's ribbon. Dante Moretti. "I'm keeping you." I sat bolt upright. My heart hammered against my ribs. I was in his house, his fortress, his mausoleum. A soft meow broke the sterile quiet. "Barnaby?" I scrambled out of the bed, my feet sinking into a plush gray rug. In the corner of the room, looking profoundly unimpressed, sat my cat. Beside him was his favorite scratchy tower, his litter box, which looked like it was made of marble, and 2 crystal bowls. One was filled with water, the other with what appeared to be seared tuna. Barnaby, the traitor, was already living his best life. "He got you too, huh?" I whispered, scratching his chin. He purred, oblivious to the fact that we were the pampered prisoners of a gorgeous, terrifying sociopath. I looked at the room. It was the East Wing, as Marco had called it. It was bigger than my entire apartment. It had its own bathroom with a tub I could swim in, a closet filled with my own threadbare clothes, which looked pathetic next to the plush robes, hanging there, and a window overlooking a vast, manicured lawn that was so perfectly green it looked fake. It was a gilded cage. A very comfortable, high thread count cage. A part of me, the part that had been checking my failing bank account every 3 hours, was screaming with relief. My debt, my crushing, suffocating debt, was gone. He'd paid it. I was solvent. The other, larger part of me was screaming, "Run!" But where would I run? To the Scarpas. The family whose funeral I'd turned into a birthday party? Dante Moretti wasn't just holding me captive. He was, in his own twisted, possessive way, protecting me. A discreet knock echoed. I jumped, pulling the silky robe tighter. Come in? The door opened, and the mountain man, Marco, stood there. He was holding a tablet. "Mr. Moretti has arranged a line of credit for you at the downtown flower market. A car is waiting to take you whenever you're ready. You are to," and I quote, "wage your war." My war? Marco's face was stone. Against the gray. "Those are your orders? You are to purchase whatever you need to begin." "Right," I said, trying to sound professional, like a personal florist and not a kidnapped hostage with a botany degree. The war of flowers. Got it." He nodded, handed me the tablet and left, the door clicking shut with terrifying finality. An hour later, I was standing in the middle of the city's central flower market, and I felt alive for the first time in days. This was my turf. The smell of damp earth, sweet freesia, and sharp eucalyptus was my air. "Poppy!" "Heard you had some trouble." At the Scarpa funeral, old man Russo called from his stall, his eyes wide with morbid curiosity. "You could say that," I muttered, trying to ignore the whispers that followed me. The story was already out. The whole market was staring at me like I was a ghost. But the tablet worked. The line of credit was real. And it was limitless. For a girl who usually had to decide between buying ranunculus or paying her electric bill, this was a dangerous, heady new power. "I'll take all of it," I said to a wholesaler, pointing to his entire stock of sunflowers. All of it, Poppy. All of it. And those and that. I was a woman possessed. I bought armloads of bright, defiant color, F-bomb orange poppies, electric yellow sunflowers, sassy pink ranunculus, deep, moody blue delphiniums. I was going to hit Dante Moretti's gray mausoleum with a tactical nuke of spring. By the time I returned, the back of the cargo van, which Dante had also provided, was a jungle. I decided to start with the foyer. It was the belly of the beast. A vast, echoing cavern of black marble, gray steel, and glass. A single, terrifyingly modern chandelier hung like a crystal spider overhead. My footsteps clicked, loud and lonely on the polished floor. In the center sat 2 massive, empty stone urns that looked like they'd been stolen from a Roman crypt. "Right," I said to myself, rolling up my sleeves. "Let's do this." I was a mess. Within 10 minutes, there was water sloshed on the floor, stray leaves everywhere, and stems covering a priceless-looking gray bench. I was on a stepladder, wrestling with a sunflower stalk that absolutely refused to cooperate, my hair sticking to my face when I felt it. A change in the air. A drop in temperature. "It looks like a highlighter exploded." His voice was a low, smooth gravel right behind me. I shrieked, my foot slipped, and I went tumbling off the ladder. A hand shot out and clamped around my waist. One hand. He stopped my fall, holding me suspended a foot off the ground as if I weighed nothing. I was dangling, my face level with his chest. My hands braced against the impossibly fine wool of his suit. My heart wasn't just beating, it was trying to escape my body. "Are you incapable?" he murmured, his voice vibrating through his chest and into my palms, of staying upright for more than 5 minutes? He set me down, but he didn't let go. His hand stayed, burned, on the small of my back. I stared at his crisp white shirt, at the perfect knot of his black tie. I could smell him again, that clean, sharp gunmetal scent. I pushed myself back, forcing him to release me. I was trembling. You snuck up on me," I accused, pointing a dirt-covered finger at him. "This place, it's like a morgue. It's too quiet." He ignored that, his dark eyes lifting to the urn I'd been attacking. It was a riot of yellow and green. Sunflowers. How cheerful. The word sounded like an insult. "It's a foyer," I shot back, indignation making me brave. I was good at this. This was the one thing I knew. It's the first thing people see. It's supposed to be cheerful. It's supposed to say, "Welcome," not "Abandon all hope, ye who enter here." A tiny, almost invisible smile quirked at the corner of his mouth. My guests rarely arrive full of hope. I can't imagine why. I gestured to the vast, empty hall. "This place is a crypt. It's all hard surfaces and dead colors. Do you just hate joy, Mr. Moretti? Is that your whole thing?" His eyes darkened. The amusement fled. He took a step closer, and I had to fight the urge to take one back. I would not be intimidated, not about flowers. "I hate clutter," he said, his gaze flicking to the mess of stems and leaves I'd made on his perfect marble floor. "And you, Miss Petal, are clutter." "I'm chaos," I corrected him, planting my hands on my hips. "You hired me for color." "You got color. This is just the beginning. I haven't even started on the dining room." "I'm breathless with anticipation," he deadpanned. He crouched, his suit pulling taut over his thighs, and picked up a single leaf I'd dropped. He held it up between his thumb and forefinger. "You're a mess." "And you're sterile," I retorted. The words hung in the air between us, charged and dangerous. His eyes locked on mine. The silence stretched, and this time it wasn't empty. It was full. It was full of my heart hammering, of the blood rushing in my ears, and of the unspoken challenge that flashed between us. He was a control freak, and I was a tornado. He rose to his full, imposing height. "My office." "Next." "Your office?" I sputtered. "I was going to do the library." "My office," he repeated, and the tone was final. He didn't wait for a reply, just turned and walked away, his footsteps as silent as his arrival. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. "Okay," I whispered to a sunflower. "He's a lot." I found his office an hour later. It was worse than the foyer. Dark wood walls, black leather chairs, a desk so large it could have its own zip code. It smelled like old books and power. It needed softness. I'd brought the peonies. Big, fluffy, pale pink globes just starting to open, mixed with delicate, cloud-like white astilbe. I set the crystal vase I'd found, and probably wasn't supposed to use, on the corner of his massive desk. The pink was an act of pure, soft defiance against the hard, masculine black. "My office is not a boudoir, Miss Petal." I spun around. He was there again, leaning against the doorframe, arms crossed over his chest. He'd appeared out of thin air. "Does this house have secret passages, or are you just part ninja?" I snapped, my nerves frayed. "The floors are carpeted," he said, walking into the room. "And these flowers are frilly." "They're peonies," I said through gritted teeth. "They're meant to be soft." "This room has all the softness of a serrated knife." "I like knives," he murmured, stopping in front of the desk. "I'm shocked," I said, my voice dripping sarcasm. "Just floored. Should I go get some cacti? A nice Venus flytrap? Would that be more on brand for you? He didn't answer. He was staring at the arrangement. He reached out one long, elegant finger and brushed it against the petal of the largest peony. His touch was so gentle, so at odds with the man himself, that it made my breath catch. "They're frivolous," he said, his voice quiet. "They're alive," I argued, stepping closer. "This room is sad. It needed this." I reached out to adjust a stem, and my hand was suddenly next to his. His skin was tan against my pale, dirt-stained fingers. His knuckle brushed the back of my hand. It was a jolt. Pure, unadulterated 10,000-volt electricity. I yanked my hand back as if I'd been burned. My heart did a stupid, traitorous flip-flop. He turned his head, his eyes meeting mine. We were standing only inches apart, separated by a cloud of pink flowers. His gaze was intense, analytical, as if he was trying to solve a puzzle. He looked at my flushed face, my trembling hand, and then back to my eyes. That tiny, dangerous smile was back. "You're afraid of me," he stated. You're a very scary man, Mr. Moretti. And yet you're still here, putting pink frilly flowers in my office. You paid my debt," I said, lifting my chin. "I'm doing my job." "Is that all this is?" he asked, his voice dropping to a low, intimate rumble that vibrated right through me. I swallowed, my throat dry. What else would it be? His eyes drifted down to my mouth. I forgot to breathe. The tension in the room was so thick I could barely move. It was terrifying. It was sizzling. He leaned in, just a fraction, and I found I was leaning in too. Then he pulled back, and the spell was broken. His face was a cold mask again. "You were right about one thing," he said, his tone clipped. "My mother liked them. The color." He looked at the peonies, and for a split second, I saw something other than a killer. I saw a flicker of pain, a shadow. "Do your job, Miss Petal," he said, his voice hard, "but try to keep the dirt confined to the pots. I won't have my house looking like your shop." And with that, he was gone. I sank into his $1 billion leather chair, my legs shaking. I was in so much trouble. He was a controlling, cold, terrifying man. And I, God help me, had just wanted him to lean a little closer.
Chapter 4. Dante. I had a problem. The problem was not the Scarpa family, who were in disarray, leaderless, and already carving each other up for scraps. That was a situation, and situations are manageable. The problem was not my cousin Nico, who was skimming from the ports. That was a betrayal, and betrayals are punishable. No, I had a problem. And the problem smelled like peonies and damp earth. My house was no longer my own. For a decade, this place had been a fortress of silence. A sterile, controlled environment where I was the only variable. The air was filtered, the light was muted, the colors were a uniform, calming scale of gray, black, and steel. It was a place where I could think. It was a place where the ghosts of my past stayed quiet, locked behind the smooth, cold marble. Now it was loud. And it wasn't just the visual noise, the explosion of garish yellow in the foyer, the soft, frilly pink in my office. It was the scent. It was the energy. I'd walked out of my office to find a trail of leaves leading down the main hall. A small puddle of water was drying on the obsidian floor. A smudge of dirt, a goddamned fingerprint, was on the wall. This was not clutter. This was an invasion. It was infuriating. It was something else. I found myself breathing deeper, The air, which had always been so sterile, now carried the scent of life, soil, rain, that sweet, cloying smell of freesia. I hated it. It was distracting. It reminded me of things I'd buried. My mother, her garden, her weakness. And yet, I hadn't told Marco to clean it up. I'd stared at the fingerprint for a full 10 seconds, an inexplicable tightness in my chest, before turning away. Tonight was the quarterly family dinner, a tedious affair where my capos and cousins gathered in the formal dining room to kiss my ring, lie about their earnings, and eat my food. It was a performance of power, and my dining room was the stage. It was the most severe room in the house, a 20-foot-long table of polished mahogany, high-backed chairs, and a single, severe crystal chandelier. I was descending the main staircase when I heard Nico's braying laugh echo from the dining room. He was early, a brown-nosing, predictable move. I entered the room and stopped. She had been here. The room was unrecognizable. The long, dark table, usually bare save for its own reflection, was now home to a runner of moss, a long, green, living thing, dotted with dark, purple hellebores, white anemones, and small, wild-looking ferns. It wasn't just a centerpiece. It was a forest floor. It was chaotic. It was alive. In a room dedicated to the cold performance of power, she had planted a wild, untamable garden. "Boss," Nico said, turning. He was a broad man, running to fat, with a taste for suits that were too shiny and rings that were too large. He gestured to the table, a sneer on his thick lips. "What is this? Did you hire a leprechaun? I feel like I'm about to eat off a log." He laughed, a wet, ugly sound. I said nothing. I walked to the table, my eyes tracing the arrangement. It was remarkable. It was audacious. She had taken the single most intimidating room in my house and made it soft, made it beautiful. The thought was so sharp, so unwelcome. It felt like a betrayal. "It stinks," Nico pressed on, sensing my silence and mistaking it for agreement. He was a fool, always overplaying his hand. "Like a goddamn swamp. What's with the new whore, boss? First, she ruined Scarpas' funeral, and now she's redecorating." The air in the room dropped 10 degrees. I turned my head, very slowly, and looked at him. "What did you call her?" Nico's smile faltered. He clearly hadn't expected this. "Come on, Dante, the little red-haired bitch, the florist. Marco said you're keeping her. She's a lot." He reached out, his thick, sausage-like fingers grabbing one of the delicate white anemones. He plucked it from the moss and held it up. "Frilly shit. Not your style." He crushed it. The petals, bruised and torn, fell to the dark wood. I'd had men killed for less, for a misplaced decimal point, for looking at me the wrong way, for existing. And Nico had just signed his own death warrant. The rage that moved through me was not hot. It never was. It was a cold, pure, surgical ice. It filled my veins, sharpened my focus. He hadn't just insulted an arrangement. He hadn't just insulted a whore. He had put his hands on my property and broken it. "Her name," I said, my voice dangerously quiet, "is Poppy. And you will not speak it again." Nico went pale. He dropped the stem as if it were burning him. "Boss, I just meant, it's just flowers. It's not you." "Isn't it?" I asked, walking around the table until I was standing directly in front of him. He was taller, heavier, but he visibly shrank. "You came into my home. You insulted my guest, and you criticized my taste. No, Dante, I just... Your mother, she liked the simple lilies. My mother... I cut him off. The ice in my voice dropping lower. Is dead. And you, Nico, seem to be confused about your own position. I leaned in, close enough to smell the sweat and the cheap cologne. You think this is about flowers? I tapped the bruised petals on the table. This is about respect. You see this clutter, and you think it's a weakness. You think she is a weakness. You see my choice to allow this life back into my house, and you mistake it for softness. I straightened my tie, my gaze holding his. His eyes were wide, panicked. You're right about one thing. I hate clutter. And your books are a fucking mess, Nico. His breath hitched. Dante? I can explain the ports. No, I said, turning away. You can't. You have 1 week to fix the numbers. And if you ever speak to or about Miss Petal again, I will have Marco remove your tongue. Understood? Yes, he whispered, his voice cracking. Yes, boss. Understood. Good. Now get out. The dinner is postponed. Your presence has ruined my appetite. He scrambled, clumsy in his haste, and fled the room. I was left alone with the silence and the scent of the forest floor she'd built. I reached out, my finger tracing the spot where Nico had crushed the flower. This was a liability, this feeling, this possessiveness. It was a complication I had not anticipated. She was a stray I'd brought in for my own amusement, and she was already causing dissent in my ranks. She was a weakness. I should have gotten rid of her. I should have sent her away, paid her off, and let the Scarpas have her. I heard a small sound at the door. Mr. Moretti? I turned. Poppy. She was standing in the doorway, her arms full of more flowers. Twigs, actually. Cherry branches, it looked like. She was wearing a pair of faded, dirt-stained overalls over a small white t-shirt, and her hair was a fiery, tangled knot on top of her head. There was a spectacular smudge of dirt across her cheekbone. She was the most alive thing I had ever seen. She didn't look at me, her eyes immediately scanning the table, her face pinched with a professional's anxiety. Is it too much? She asked, her voice small. I know you said you hated clutter, but this room was so heavy. I wanted to make it feel like, people could actually talk in here, not just sign treaties. She bit her lip, finally looking at me. Do you hate it? Be honest. I can take it. I looked from her, a chaotic masterpiece of dirt and fire, to the elegant, wild mess on my table. I thought of Nico's sneer. Not your style. It's busy, I said, my voice clipped. She deflated, her shoulders slumping. Oh, right. Busy. That's code for awful. I knew it. I knew I should have gone with the simple white. But it felt so sad. I didn't say I hated it, I interrupted. She snapped her head up, her green eyes wide. You don't? I walked toward her. She took an involuntary step back, then held her ground, clutching the branches to her chest like a shield. I stopped in front of her. She was so small, and she smelled like fresh-cut stems. Nico thought it was frivolous, I said, watching her face. Nico? The cousin who looked like a purple-faced potato at the funeral? She asked, her nose wrinkling. Well, he looks like a man who thinks a bucket of watered-down beer is high class. I'm not surprised. I almost smiled. Almost. He crushed one of the anemones. Poppy's head whipped to the table. She saw the bruised petals. Her face, which had been so open and bright, darkened. He what? She marched to the table, her eyes flashing. What a brute! Who does that? Who crushes a flower? It's like kicking a puppy. She was genuinely, fiercely angry. Not at the man who could kill her, but at the man who had disrespected her work. I found the thought satisfying. I agree, I said. She turned to me, surprised by the solidarity in my tone. We stood there on opposite sides of the table, united in our disdain for Nico's brutishness. The tension in the room shifted. It was no longer cold. It was something else. It was the same charged particle hum that had filled my office. It was her and me in this space she had transformed. You have dirt on your face, I said, my voice low. What? She immediately rubbed the wrong cheek. Is it gone? No. I moved before I could stop myself. I crossed the space between us in 2 strides. She froze, her eyes widening, her breath catching as I closed the distance. I was towering over her. I lifted my hand, and she flinched, but she didn't run. I rested my thumb on the smudge of dirt on her cheek. Her skin was impossibly soft, warm, like the petals she was so angry about. I rubbed the dirt away, the gesture slow, possessive, deliberate. She wasn't breathing. Her lips parted on a silent gasp. Her eyes were locked on mine, and in their green depths I saw her terror, and beneath it, sizzling and hot, curiosity. You are, I murmured, my thumb still resting on the high curve of her cheek. A constant, infuriating mess, poppy petal. My thumb stroked her skin once. Fix it. I have other, more important messes to clean up. I dropped my hand and walked out of the room, leaving her trembling in the middle of her forest, her hand pressed to the spot on her cheek I had just claimed.
Chapter 5. Poppy. My cheek was on fire. I stood frozen in the cavernous dining room, my hand pressed to the spot his thumb had touched. The forest floor I'd built on his table suddenly seemed like a child's messy art project. He'd left, but the air was still vibrating with his presence, thick and heavy, like the atmosphere before a lightning strike. A constant, infuriating mess. He'd said it like a curse, but he'd looked at me. He'd touched me, like I was something else, something he couldn't quite figure out, something he hadn't immediately crushed. My heart was a hummingbird, trapped in my ribs. I was terrified, and God help me, I was tingling. The place on my cheek, his thumbprint, was a brand. I was his. He'd claimed me in front of his brutish cousin, and then he'd claimed me again, with a touch so soft it felt like a threat. Fix it, he'd ordered, and I knew he wasn't just talking about the dirt. I let out a shaky breath and yanked my hand away from my face. Get a grip, Petal, I whispered, my voice sounding scandalously loud in the quiet. Barnaby had better survival instincts than I did. I was a mouse, and I was actively fantasizing about the cat's claws. I couldn't stay in this house. Not right now. The walls were too close. The gray was suffocating, and every shadow looked like it was shaped like him. I needed air. I needed green. I fled. I half ran out of the dining room, through the mausoleum of a foyer, My sunflowers looked garish and stupid under the cold light, and found a set of glass doors I hadn't noticed before. I shoved them open and practically fell outside, gulping in the cool afternoon air. The grounds were perfect. Of course they were. Not a blade of grass was out of place. The lawn was an emerald carpet, rolling away to sculpted hedges and trees that stood in perfect, soldier-like rows. It was the same as the inside, sterile, controlled, and utterly, unnervingly lifeless. There wasn't a single weed. There wasn't a single flower. Not one. It was all green and gray, manicured bushes and stone paths. It was a prison yard, just a very expensive one. I walked, my sneakers crunching on the pristine gravel path. I needed to do something. My hands were buzzing with nervous energy. The war on Gray was feeling less like a job and more like a desperate act of survival. I was the only splash of chaos in his entire, curated world, and I felt like I was being slowly suffocated by his control. I walked for what felt like 10 minutes, following the path as it curved around the back of the mansion, which was less a house and more a corporate headquarters for a small, evil country. That's when I saw it. Tucked away, almost hidden by a row of unnaturally perfect cypress trees, was a wall. A high brick wall, old and crumbling in places, covered in a shroud of dead, skeletal ivy. It was completely out of place. Everything else was modern steel and glass, and this was old. This was forgotten. My feet moved on their own. I pushed through the cypress branches and found a gate. It was iron, rusted, and bound with a heavy, thick chain and a padlock that looked as old as the wall. I was looking at a secret. My curiosity, always my worst trait, flared to life. I put my hands on the rusted bars. Inside, I could see nothing, just a tangle of what looked like dead branches. I had to get in. I pushed on the gate. It rattled but held. The chain was immovable. I looked at the wall. It was maybe 10 feet high, covered in the dead ivy, which was as thick as rope. "Oh, you have got to be kidding me, Poppy," I muttered to myself. I was in overalls. I was already covered in dirt. I looked left, then right. The perfect empty lawn stared back. No guards, no gardeners, just me. I grabbed a handful of dead ivy, tested it, it held, and I started to climb. It was stupid. It was reckless. My foot slipped. I scraped my knee and I swore, clinging to the bricks. But I was a woman possessed. I hauled myself up, my muscles straining, and balanced precariously on top of the wall. I looked down, and my heart broke. It wasn't a yard, it was, or had been, a garden. A formal, intricate, beautiful garden, and it was completely, utterly dead. It was a skeleton. A dry, cracked fountain stood in the center, its stone cherub missing a head. 4 stone benches, green with moss and mildew, were crumbling. And the plants. Oh, the plants. They were ghosts. Dead rose bushes, thick and black with thorns, clawed at the air. Withered heaps of lavender lay in tangled gray mats. The ground was a carpet of weeds and cracked earth. It was a place where something had died. Not just the plants. It felt like hope had died here. I dropped down from the wall, landing with a soft thud on the weedy ground. The silence in here was different from the silence in the house. This was a sad, neglected silence. I walked to the fountain. A small dead bird lay in the dry basin. "Oh, you poor things," I whispered, touching the brittle branch of a rose bush. It snapped in my fingers, turning to dust. This garden hadn't just been left alone. It had been abandoned, murdered by neglect. How could anyone let this happen? How could Dante Moretti, a man who controlled every single blade of grass on his property, a man who noticed a single fingerprint on his wall, how could he let this exquisite place rot? I felt a sudden fierce surge of anger. It was a familiar professional rage. It was the same way I felt when I saw someone leave a bouquet in a hot car or cut a stem wrong. It was an offense against life. "This is a crime," I said to the headless cherub. I knelt in the dirt, my hands sinking into the dry, compacted soil. It was terrible. No nutrients, no water. But I looked closer. Beneath a tangle of weeds, a single stubborn shoot of green. A hardy, determined little mint plant, fighting for its life. Life. It wanted to be here. "I could fix this," I whispered. The thought was a revelation. This was a puzzle I could solve. This wasn't about putting frilly flowers in a vase to annoy a billionaire murderer. This was about resurrection. I could bring this place back. I could clear the weeds, test the soil, amend it. I could prune back the dead wood, see what was salvageable. I could fix the irrigation, fill the fountain. I was so lost in my plan, my fingers already digging at the root of a stubborn thistle, that I didn't hear him. I never heard him. "Get out!" The voice was not his usual low, gravelly monotone. It was flat. It was dead. I scrambled to my feet, my heart leaping into my throat. He was standing by the rusted gate. He wasn't chained out. He was standing inside. There must have been another entrance. He wasn't looking at me. He was staring at the dead fountain, his hands clenched at his sides, his body so rigid he looked like one of the statues. "I said," he repeated, his voice lethally soft, "Get out." I climbed the wall," I said, which was possibly the stupidest sounding confession ever. "The gate was locked. I saw it, and—" He turned his head. His face was a blank mask of marble, but his eyes were not cold. They were black. Black with a pain so deep and bottomless it terrified me more than his anger ever had. "This place," he said, "is not for you." "It's not for anyone," I shot back, my anger and my fear all tangling up. "It's dead. It's a boneyard. How could you just let it die like this? It's beautiful." "It was," he snarled, taking a step toward me. "And now it is exactly as it should be. Dead. Leave." "No." The word was out before I could stop it. His head snapped up. No one, I realized, said no to Dante Moretti. I was shaking. My knee was bleeding. I was covered in grime and dead leaves. And I was furious. "No," I said again, my voice stronger. "You hired me to bring life to this mausoleum. You hired me to wage a war on all this death." I waved my hands around the desolate garden. "Well, this is the heart of it, isn't it? This is the one place that's actually supposed to be alive, and you've let it rot. You've choked it." "You don't know what you're talking about," he bit out, striding toward me. He was radiating an aura of such cold, contained violence that my survival instincts were screaming at me to run, to climb the wall, to apologize. But I held my ground. He stopped a foot in front of me, glaring down at me. "I will not tell you again, Poppy." "Why?" I demanded, tilting my chin back to meet his gaze. "Why let it die?" Who did this belong to? His jaw clenched so hard I saw a muscle jump. His black eyes they weren't just angry. They were broken. It was my mother's. The 3 words hit me like a ton of bricks. Oh God, suddenly everything made sense. The cold house, the lack of life, the gray walls, his flicker of pain at the peonies, his hatred of frivolous things. His mother liked them, and she was gone, and so everything she loved had to be gone too. He hadn't just let this garden die, he'd been letting himself die with it. My anger evaporated, replaced by a wave of understanding. An ache that resonated deep in my chest. I knew what it was to lose someone and have the color drain from the world. He looked wrecked. He was staring at the dead rose bushes over my shoulder, but he wasn't seeing them. He was seeing her. "Dante," I said, my voice soft. I hadn't even realized I'd used his first name. He flinched, his eyes snapping back to mine. The mask was back, cold and hard. "Don't." "She wouldn't want this," I whispered. "What do you know about what she'd want?" he snarled. "I know plants," I said, my voice fierce. "I know gardeners. And a gardener would never want their garden to look like this. They'd want it to be messy and chaotic and full of clutter." I took a shaky breath. I was way over the line. I was in his most private, painful place, and I was poking it with a stick. "I'm going to fix it," I said. He stared at me as if I'd just grown a second head. "You'll do no such thing. You will not touch a single thing in here." "I am," I insisted, planting my dirty hands on my hips. I was defying a killer. About gardening, I was insane. "You hired me to be your florist. This is a garden. It's my job. You paid off my debt, Mr. Moretti. You own my work, and my work is going to be here." We were in a standoff. Him, a pillar of dark, contained grief. Me, a chaotic, dirt-stained mess. "You're not bringing this place back to life," he said, his voice raw. "Watch me," I challenged him. "This garden, it's not dead. It's just sleeping. And I'm going to wake it up. For her." He stared at me for a long, agonizing moment. His throat worked. I could see the war behind his eyes, the part of him that wanted to keep it a tomb, and the small part I'd seen with the peonies, that missed the color. He didn't say yes. He didn't say no. He just turned, his black suit immaculate against the decay, and walked away. He left the same way he'd come, through a hidden door in the wall I hadn't even seen, and he didn't look back. I was left alone in the boneyard, alone with the dead bird and the crumbling cherub. "Okay," I whispered to the little mint shoot. "It's just you and me. Let's get to work."
Chapter 6. Dante. For 3 days I did not go to the garden. I did not go near the west wing. I buried myself in the clean, sterile silence of my office, drowning in logistics, in numbers, in the clean, cold reality of my world. I finalized the restructuring of Nico's port operation. I fielded calls. I signed orders. I did the work of a man who controls an empire, and I did it from a room that still, faintly, smelled of her goddamned frilly pink flowers. I had tried to have them removed. The morning after our confrontation in the garden, I'd told Marco to clear them out. An hour later, I'd found him standing in the hallway, looking profoundly uncomfortable. "Sir," he'd said, "Miss Petal insists. The peonies require a specific ambient temperature. She says removing them will shock their systems and kill them." I'd stared at him. He was a man who had, on my order, broken another man's legs with a tire iron, and he was being stonewalled by a 5'4" mess of red hair and dirt. "So?" I'd asked. Marco had just looked at me. "She's very passionate about it, sir. She said, 'They're not dead yet, and I won't let another living thing in this house die of neglect.'" The message was clear. It wasn't about the flowers. It was a shot, fired directly at me. "Fine," I'd snapped. "Leave the damned things." So I worked, pretending the scent didn't exist, pretending she didn't exist. It was a failure. I was a man defined by control. My life was a fortress of habit and precision. And this woman, this problem, had breached every wall, She was a virus in my system. I'd seen her, of course, flashes of her. A whirlwind of color moving down a gray hall, the sound of her humming in the library as she replaced a vase, leaving a trail of water in her wake. The entire downstairs smelled like a jungle. But she, too, had avoided me. She had kept to her work, and I to mine. And yet, I knew exactly where she was. She was in her garden. I'd told her to leave. I'd used a tone that had made grown men faint. And she had said, "Number. Watch me." The audacity of it was infuriating. It was unacceptable. And it was the only goddamned thing I could think about. On the fourth day, I broke. The curiosity was a physical itch under my skin. I needed to see. I needed to see the sacrilege she was committing. I went, not through the hidden door, my door, but the main gate. The heavy chain and padlock were gone. In their place was a simple new brass latch. She had broken my lock. I pushed the gate open. The rusted hinges shrieked in protest. The boneyard was gone. In its place was chaos. She was everywhere. The entire center of the garden was a staging ground. Huge plastic bags of black soil, flats of new baby green plants I didn't recognize. Tools I'd never seen before, rakes, hoes, strange metal claws, were scattered on the path. And she was on her hands and knees in the center of what used to be a dead rose bed, wearing the same ridiculous overalls, her hair tied up in a scarf, and she was covered in mud. Not dirt, mud. There was a massive streak of it across her jaw. She was wrestling with a thick black root, trying to pull it from the ground. She was grunting with effort, her entire body straining. "It's dead," I said, my voice sounding unnaturally loud in the open air. She yelped, scrambling backward and falling on her ass. She glared at me, her chest heaving, her green eyes flashing. "Jesus! Do you just materialize? You're going to give me a heart attack." "That root, it's dead," I repeated, walking onto the path. I had to step over a pile of mulch. The smell was raw, earthy. It was the smell of decomposition, the smell of life. "I know it's dead, you... Lurch!" she snapped, getting to her feet and wiping her muddy hands on her overalls, which only made it worse. "I'm not trying to save it. I'm trying to exhume it. It's choking the soil. I can't plant the new ones until the old dead rot is gone." She pointed to a line of small potted bushes. "These are David Austin's. Heirloom roses. They need clean dirt." I looked at the hole she'd been digging. She'd made a mess. It was just a pit of wet mud. My gardeners, the ones who kept my lawn as flat as a billiard table, would have had this done in an hour, with clean lines and a tarp for the debris. She looked like she'd been mud wrestling a pig. "You're doing it wrong," I said. Her eyes narrowed to slits. "Excuse me?" "You're using your hands. You'll be here for a week. Where is the shovel?" "The shovel," she said through gritted teeth, "is over there. But I can't use the shovel because the root system is tangled with a lavender bush that's not dead. See?" She pointed to a tiny, almost invisible sprig of gray-green. "If I just go in there with a spade, I'll kill it. I have to do it by hand." She turned her back on me, knelt, and went back to wrestling the root. I stood there, motionless. I was Dante Moretti, the executioner. Men did not turn their backs on me, not unless they wanted a bullet in them. And this girl was ignoring me for a root. The disrespect was so profound, so complete, I found myself frozen. "That's inefficient," I said, my voice stiff. "It's gardening," she shot back, not looking up. "It's not accounting. It's not whacking people. It's messy, and it takes time. Something you and your sterile, perfect, dead house know nothing about." She was digging her fingers into the mud, clawing at the earth. "This whole place, it's grieving, it's stuck, and the only way to fix it is to get your hands dirty and pull out the rot." She yanked, hard. The root gave a little, and she grunted in triumph. I watched the muscles in her back and shoulders pull taut under her thin t-shirt. She was strong, not like a man, but tenacious. She was a weed, a stubborn, infuriating, persistent weed. "Give me the shovel," I said. She stopped, turning to look at me over her shoulder. "What?" "The shovel. I'll cut the root." "I just told you," she said, exasperated. "You'll kill the lavender." "I won't!" I strode over, grabbed the spade. It felt wrong, foreign. The wooden handle was rough against my palms. I was used to steel, to the balanced weight of a firearm. This was crude. I jammed the blade into the earth, a foot from where she was digging. "No! Stop! You're—" I put my foot on the spade and drove it down. I felt the thunk as it hit the thickest part of the root. I leveraged my weight, and the ground groaned. I was stronger. I was efficient. "There," I said, pulling the spade out. Poppy was staring at the ground, horrified. You. She plunged her hands into the earth, pulling soil away. The main root was severed, but the spade, just as she'd predicted, had sliced through the delicate root ball of the lavender. "You killed it!" she shrieked, holding up the mangled roots. You murderer!" The word hit me in the gut. She hadn't said it like an accusation. She'd said it like a fact, like I had just murdered a plant. "It's a weed," I said, my voice coming out colder than I intended. "It was alive," she cried, her face flushed with anger. She looked devastated. "It was trying. It survived 10 years of neglect, and you just executed it because you couldn't be bothered to be careful." She threw the dead plant on the ground between my feet. "Get out. Get out of my garden. You don't deserve to be in here." I stared at the small, mangled clump of gray-green. A flicker of something moved in my chest. Shame. It was unwelcome. It was disgusting. "It was in the way," I said, defending an action I suddenly, inexplicably regretted. "That's the point of a garden," she yelled, standing up. She was vibrating with rage. "Things get in the way. They grow. They tangle. You can't just control everything, Dante. You can't just kill everything that's inconvenient." She was breathing hard, her cheeks red, her eyes bright with tears of fury. And I was awkward. I, who had faced down Don Scarpa's entire crew without my pulse rising. I, who had sat in a room and calmly explained to a man, in detail, how I was going to dismantle his life. I was standing in a mud pit, being yelled at by a dirt-smudged girl, and I had no idea what to do. "I apologize," I said. The words tasted like ash. Poppy's mouth fell open. The anger drained away, replaced by pure, dumbfounded shock. I felt the need to fix it. The way I'd fixed her debt. The way I'd fixed Nico. Here. I strode over to the flats of new plants she'd bought. I grabbed one. A small green thing in a plastic pot. We'll plant this one. That, she said, her voice shaky, is a delphinium. It's an annual. It's not lavender. It's a plant, I said, annoyed. I knelt, my suit trousers sinking into the damp earth. I didn't care. I needed to undo what I'd done. I started digging with my hands. The mud was cool, wet. It squelched between my fingers, got under my nails. It was repulsive. Stop, she said. What are you doing? You're digging a grave. You're going to break that one too. You have executioner hands. I froze, my hands full of mud. What? You're rough. You're holding the pot like you're trying to choke it. You're Dante. You don't know how to do this. She was right. I was a killer. I was a destroyer. I didn't know how to plant. I only knew how to bury. I looked at the small, fragile green thing in my hand. I was, in fact, crushing the plastic pot. I let it go. Then show me. The challenge hung in the air. She stared at me, her eyes wide. She was still shocked, still wary. Slowly, she knelt in the mud in front of me. We were knee to knee, so close I could smell the sweat on her skin, mingling with the scent of the raw earth. You can't just force it, she said, her voice soft now, gentle. Plants, they're not like steel. They're stubborn, but they're fragile. You have to persuade them. She picked up a small potted seedling. It was tiny, just 2 small leaves. This is a baby bellflower, she whispered. It was my grandmother's favorite. She held it out. Hold out your hands. I did. I held them out, palms up, the mud from my digging still on them. No, she said, with a small, frustrated sigh. Not like you're waiting to be paid. Like you're holding water. I cupped my hands. She gently placed the small pot in my palms. It was nothing. It weighed nothing. Okay, she said. Now you have to ease it out. Squeeze the bottom of the pot. Gently, gently. Now, turn it over. I did. And the small clump of earth, roots and all, fell into my other palm. It was warm. The earth was warm, and it was a small, breathing, living thing. I was holding it. My heart was beating, fast. Poppy was looking at my hands. Okay, now, the hole. She used her fingers to dig a small depression in the wet earth. Right here. Now. Place it in. I moved my hand. The small plant sat in the hole. Now, she whispered. The soil. Just tuck it in. Like a blanket. Not packing it down. Just covering its roots. To keep it safe. She reached out. Her hand, small and covered in mud, closed over mine. Her skin was hot, calloused. It was a worker's hand. but it was electric. She placed my hand, her hand still on top of it, onto the earth. She guided my fingers, showing me how to brush the soil around the delicate stem. My God, my pulse was a hammer. I could feel her pulse, thrumming against the back of my hand, her skin on mine. Our hands, caked in the same mud, buried in the same earth, in my mother's earth. It was the most intimate, agonizing, unbearable sensation I had ever experienced. I wasn't breathing. I was staring at our hands. Her small, freckled hand, stained with soil, covering my own. I wanted to turn my hand over and grab hers. I wanted to pull her. I wanted to taste the mud on her jaw. I felt a jolt, a sudden violent surge of want. It was so sharp, so primal, it was terrifying. She must have felt it. She gasped, her head snapping up. Her eyes met mine. We were inches apart. Her lips were parted. Her eyes, green and wide, were full of not fear, not this time, tension. She knew. She felt it too. This raw, pulling, sizzling thing in the mud. I couldn't. This was weakness. This was her. This was the rot she was talking about. This was the vulnerability that had gotten my mother killed. I pulled my hand back. I stood up too fast. Poppy fell back, startled. The spell was broken. I looked at my hands, covered in mud, filthy. I have work to do, I said. My voice was a rasp. I turned and walked away. I didn't look back. I didn't run. I walked, my back straight. Every ounce of my control was focused on not turning around, not pulling her up, and not finishing what we had just started. I got to the gate. I stopped, my hand on the new brass latch. "Marco," I said, my voice clear and cold, "we'll have a shipment of tools delivered this afternoon. Proper ones." I didn't wait for her reply. I walked out, shutting the gate with a quiet, definitive click, leaving her alone in the garden, my hands, my suit, my world, irrevocably, infuriatingly stained.
Chapter 7. Poppy. My hands were shaking. I knelt in the mud for a long time after he left, staring at the small, perfect hole where his hands had been. The earth was still warm. He'd touched me. Not like the first time when his thumb had grazed my cheek, a calculated act of possession, a warning. This had been uncalculated. He'd been as lost as I was. Our hands, covered in the same soil, his pulse hammering against mine. It was the most intimate thing I had ever experienced. He'd held a living plant. He'd held it gently. And then he'd felt me feel him. And he'd run. Not run. He'd retreated. Pulled the steel walls back up so fast it gave me whiplash, leaving me on the ground, breathless and muddy, my entire nervous system lit up like a switchboard. "I have work to do." He'd said it like an accusation. Like I was the one who had dragged him into the mud, forced him to feel something, and stained his perfect empty world. Irrevocably, infuriatingly stained? That had been me, in his dining room. He'd thrown my own words back at me. I looked at my own hands, still caked in the dark, rich soil. I was stained, too. A low, shaky laugh bubbled in my chest. "You're in so deep, Petal," I whispered to the little bellflower he'd almost planted. I carefully tucked the rest of the soil around its roots, just as I'd shown him. Tuck it in, to keep it safe. My God. I was falling for a murderer. A cold, beautiful, broken, terrifying man who thought a lavender plant was an inconvenience. I was, without a doubt, the stupidest woman alive. I stayed in that garden until the sun started to dip, my shadow stretching long over the newly turned earth. I worked with a frantic, desperate energy. I needed this. I needed to pour all of this tension, into the ground. I ripped out the rest of the dead rose roots, my muscles screaming, my mind blessedly blank, focused only on the work. I was covered head to toe in filth, my hair escaping its scarf, when Marco's voice made me jump. "Miss Petal!" I spun around, my hand gripping my trowel like a weapon. He was standing at the new brass latch, and he was not alone. Behind him stood 2 other men, and they were wheeling in carts. "Mr. Moretti," Marco said, his face impassive, "felt your tools were inadequate." Inadequate. I looked at my trusty, rust-covered shovel. They work fine. "He has," Marco continued, "opened an account for you at the city's main horticultural supply. These are the basics." He ordered to begin. One by one, the men began to unload. It wasn't basics. It was an invasion. They brought in ergonomic, titanium-plated shovels and spades and pitchforks. They brought in a state-of-the-art, whisper-quiet wheelbarrow. They brought in box after box of specialty fertilizers, bone meal, blood meal, and bags of mulch made from cedar, pine, and cocoa husks. They brought in coils of high-tech soaker hoses and a gleaming new irrigation controller. It was everything. It was thousands of dollars of the best equipment money could buy. It was the most over-the-top, ridiculously masculine, "I'm fixing this with money" gesture I had ever seen. And it was kind of sweet. He'd listened. He'd seen me wrestling with a root. And his solution was to buy me an arsenal. "This," I said, picking up a pair of Japanese pruning shears that felt perfectly balanced in my hand, "is a lot." "Mr. Moretti is thorough," Marco said. It was the driest, most subtle hint of a joke I'd ever heard from him. "Right," I said, a small, ridiculous smile pulling at my lips. "Thorough. Well, thank him for me. This is great." Marco nodded once. "Dinner is at 8, Miss Petal. The kitchen has been instructed to compensate for your new workload." He left. I stood alone in the dying light, surrounded by a fortress of brand-new, top-of-the-line gardening gear. He'd apologized. He'd let me show him. And then he'd bought me tools. My stupid, traitorous heart did a little flip. The next 2 weeks were the strangest of my life. I fell into a new rhythm. I was up with the sun. I'd grab a coffee from the silent kitchen, where the cook, a stern, older Italian woman named Sophia, now left a pastry out for me every morning, and I'd head straight to the garden. I worked, I labored, I dug, I pruned, I weeded, I amended the soil. I exhumed the dead and planted the new. The garden, under my hands, began to breathe again. The old, skeletal roses that were salvageable, I pruned back hard, feeding them until I saw the faint, reddish blush of new growth on their canes. The dead ones, I replaced. I planted climbing roses against the crumbling brick and the heirloom bushes where the rot had been. I filled the borders with lavender, with foxgloves, with delphiniums, and, yes, with a ton of bellflowers. I got the fountain working. It took a new pump, another thorough purchase from Dante. But the sound of water trickling from the still headless cherub changed everything. The garden was alive. And Dante? He stayed away. We were two magnets, turned to repel. We lived in the same house, but we orbited each other at a distance. I would be in the garden, and I'd feel it. A prickle on the back of my neck. I'd look up, and he'd be there. A dark, severe shape in the window of his office, 3 floors up, watching me. Just watching. The moment I looked, he'd step back, gone. Or I'd be in the library, replacing the water in a vase, and he'd walk in. The air would instantly crack with tension. We'd freeze. He'd stare at me, his eyes black and unreadable. I'd stare back, my heart in my throat. He'd say, "Poppy," his voice a low gravel. I'd say, "Dante," my voice a breathless squeak. And then one of us would flee, usually me. The sexual tension was a living thing. It was agonizing. It was a high, thin wire, pulled so taut between us that I was terrified it would snap. He wouldn't touch me, he wouldn't come near me, but his eyes were on me constantly. He was a man starving, and I was a feast he refused to eat. He was protecting me from him. The house, too, was changing. The war on Grey was a success. There were flowers everywhere. The staff, who had first looked at me like I was a ticking bomb, now smiled. Sophia would ask me what herbs I wanted her to plant in the new kitchen patch I'd built. Marco would on occasion offer a weather report. "Rain tomorrow, Miss Petal. Cover the seedlings." I had a life here. A weird, terrifying, gilded cage life. But it was his cage. One afternoon, I hit a snag. I needed a very specific strain of mycorrhizal fungi to help the new rose roots establish, and my usual supplier, the only one in the state who carried it, was a small, independent nursery. They didn't do accounts. I found Marco in the foyer. I need to go out," I said. He stopped, his polite automaton face slipping for a fraction. "Out?" "To my shop. Poppy's Petals. I need to pick up some specialty items, and I need to check on Barnaby." "Barnaby?" "My cat." Marco's face did an impressive job of not reacting to the fact that I had a cat named Barnaby. "I see. I will inform Mr. Moretti." "You don't need to inform him," I said, bristling. I'm going. I'll take a cab." Marco actually smiled. It was terrifying. "Miss Petal, you will not be taking a cab." An hour later, I was in the back of a black-on-black Mercedes SUV that probably cost more than my entire college education. 2 of Dante's men were in the front. They were silent, suited, and had the same "I eat nails for breakfast" look as all his men. "This is ridiculous," I muttered, staring out the tinted window. "Mr. Moretti's orders, miss," the driver said, his eyes on the road. I was a prisoner, a very well-cared-for, well-gardened prisoner. I fumed in silence all the way to my neighborhood. The SUV pulled up in front of Poppy's Petals, my little shop. It looked so small, so normal. The paint was peeling, and the window box I'd planted was overflowing. Mrs. Rodriguez, my part-time helper, was inside, watering the ferns. The 2 guards got out with me. "I'm just going in," I said. "You don't have to." "We'll secure the entrance, miss," one of them said, and just stood on the sidewalk, like a human mountain. I felt like a visiting dignitary. Mrs. Rodriguez's eyes went wide as saucers when I walked in, flanked by a silent goon. "Poppy! Mija!" she cried. Who are these men?" "They're my drivers," I lied, feeling heat creep up my neck. "Barnaby!" I yelled, and my big orange one-eyed lummox came trotting out from the back, meowing his head off. I scooped him up, burying my face in his fur. He smelled like potting soil and cat food. He smelled like home. "Oh, I missed you, you big idiot," I whispered. I spent 20 minutes gathering my supplies, hugging Barnaby, and assuring Mrs. Rodriguez I was fine, just consulting. She kept staring at the mountain at the door. I loaded my box of supplies into the SUV, the guards watching every single car that passed. It was unnerving. "Okay, I'm all set," I said, sliding back in, and as the driver pulled away from the curb, I saw it. A car. A dark green sedan, old and beaten up, but clean. It was parked across the street. It had been there the whole time. And the two men inside were not looking at their phones. They were staring, right at me. It wasn't a checking out a girl stare. It was dead. Cold. Like a snake staring at a mouse. One of them, the passenger, was older. He had a scarred-over lip. He saw me look. He didn't look away. He just smiled. A slow, ugly smile. And then, very deliberately, he lifted his hand, pointed his finger right at me, and pretended to pull a trigger. My blood turned to ice. "Go," I whispered. "Go." "Go." "Miss," the driver asked. "That car." I pointed, my hand shaking. "The green one. They're... My guards didn't need to be told. The driver had already seen it. He hit the gas, and the SUV leaped forward. The guard in the passenger seat was already on his radio, speaking low, rapid-fire Italian. The words Scarpas and Nipoti, nephews, cut through the air. The ride back to the mansion was not a fuming one. It was a silent, terrifying one. I watched the side mirrors the entire way, my heart hammering against my ribs, expecting that green car to be behind us. The gates of the Moretti estate slid shut behind us, and it was the first time I had ever been grateful for them. That iron, which had seemed like a cage, now felt like a shield. I was shaking when I got out of the SUV. He was there. Dante. He was standing on the top step of the mansion, no coat, in his shirt sleeves. He must have run from his office. His face was granite. "Report," he said to the guard. The guard spoke in Italian. I didn't understand the words, but I understood the tone. Urgent, serious. Dante's eyes found mine. He walked down the steps, crossing the gravel toward me. He didn't stop until he was towering over me. "What happened?" he demanded. His voice was low, controlled, but there was a fire banked behind his eyes. I was at the shop," I stammered, "when we left. There was a car. Two men, they stared at me. One of them, he smiled, and I couldn't say it. I lifted my shaking hand and mimicked the finger gun gesture. Dante's entire body went rigid. A stillness so absolute it was more violent than any movement. "Scarpa's nephews," he said. It wasn't a question. I guess. I was trembling. Why? Why were they looking at me like that? I just delivered flowers. He reached out. Not to my cheek. Not to my hand. He curled his fingers, just slightly, around my upper arm. His grip was steel. Possessive. Anchoring. He looked down at me, his black eyes unblinking. "You delivered the wrong flowers to their uncle's funeral," he said, his voice a low, cold rasp. "You are living in my house. You are tending my mother's garden." He pulled me a half step closer. "They weren't looking at a florist, Poppy," he said. "They were looking at my florist. They think you are mine." The last word vibrated in the air between us. Mine. He'd said it, He'd finally said it. And it wasn't a romantic declaration. It was a death sentence.
Chapter 8. Dante. They think you are mine. The words hung in the cold, clear air between us, and I felt the truth of them settle in my gut like a block of ice. They weren't just an observation. They were a verdict. Poppy's face was pale, her green eyes wide and luminous with a terror that had finally become real to her. She'd been playing in a boneyard, thinking it was just a garden. Now the ghosts were at the gate. They think, because I'm here? She whispered, her hand still clutching the box of fungi. Such a ridiculously fragile, poppy thing to be holding in the face of all this. Because you were at the funeral, I said, my voice flat, my grip on her arm unrelenting. Because you are in my car. Because you sleep in my house. Because you are at this moment wearing my scent. They see a thing I have claimed, and they will try to break it. My rage was a quiet, cold thing. It was not the explosive, idiotic fury of my cousin Nico. It was a precision instrument. It was the Arctic stillness that settled on my world right before I ended someone. And the Scarpa nephews, Angelo's sniveling, useless heirs, had just put themselves on my list. I marched her inside, my hand on her back. She was trembling, or perhaps I was. The line was blurring. "Marco!" I snapped as we entered the foyer. Her sunflowers, blazing yellow in the urns, seemed to mock the coldness in my chest. She is not to leave the grounds. No one in, no one out. Full perimeter lockdown, double the rotation. Put a man on the garden gate. She doesn't take one step outside this house without an escort. Understood? Yes, boss, he said, his eyes flicking to Poppy's pale face, then back to mine. Poppy bristled, yanking her arm from my grasp. The terror was being replaced by that infuriating, chaotic fire I simultaneously hated and craved. "You can't do that," she cried. You can't put me on lockdown. I am not your prisoner." I turned to her, slow. I let the full, unadulterated coldness of my world wash over her. "That is exactly what you are," I said, my voice lethal. "You were a target before. Now you are a message. Do you understand? They won't just kill you. They will do it in a way that hurts me." I took a step, backing her against the marble wall. "This is not a game, Fiorellino. This is not a frilly pink flower. This is my world, and you have, by some spectacular, clumsy accident, become the most valuable thing in it. So you will stay, and you will be safe. Because if they touch you..." I let the promise hang, a threat so absolute it needed no further words. I didn't wait for her reply. I turned and went to my office. I had calls to make. I was going to dismantle the Scarpa family brick by brick, starting now. I was 3 calls in, rerouting shipments, cutting off their supply lines, bleeding them dry before I bled them out, when Marco buzzed. "Boss, we have a problem." My blood went from Arctic to absolute zero. "She didn't..." "No, sir. She's in the garden. I have 2 men on her. It's the shop." I was silent. "The men who were tailing her, they must have followed her back," Marco said, his voice grim. "The Scarpas, they hit it, right after she left. It was a message. For you." I hung up. I didn't take a car. I ran. No, I didn't run. I moved. I was in the back of the SUV in 20 seconds, Marco at the wheel, and we were tearing through the city. My rage was no longer a cold, still thing. It was a black hole sucking in all light, all reason. He'd said they'd hit it. I'd pictured a broken window, a rock. The reality was a desecration. We pulled up. The street was already blocked. A fire truck was just leaving, its lights off. The threat was over. The damage was done. Her little shop, Poppy's Petals, was a smoking, watery grave. They hadn't just broken a window. They'd firebombed it. The glass was gone, shattered into a million pieces. The front door was a blackened hole. The bright, cheerful green paint I'd seen in the surveillance photos was now just a scorched, peeling memory. And the smell. It was the smell of my mother's garden, burnt, the acrid, sickening stench of ash, wet plaster, and dead flowers, thousands of them, cooked, wilted, and drowned by the fire hoses. I stepped out of the SUV. She was there. I hadn't seen her. How had she gotten here? She was standing on the sidewalk, past the police tape she must have ducked under. She was standing in a puddle, staring into the black, gaping maw of her life's work. "Poppy," I said. My voice was a rasp. She didn't turn. She was covered in soot. She must have run from the mansion, past the guards. She must have called a cab. She disobeyed my every order. He was still in there," she whispered. Her voice was hollow, broken. My blood stopped. "Who?" "Barnaby," she choked out. My cat. Mrs. Rodriguez was going to take him home tonight, but he was inside." She was holding something, a small terracotta pot. It was cracked, and the plant inside, a single green fern, was broken, its fronds limp and blackened. She was crying, not loudly, just a silent, steady stream of tears that cut clean paths through the soot on her cheeks. A small, orange, one-eyed cat. I'd forgotten about the cat. I looked from her broken, filthy face to the smoking ruin. This was because of me. This was my fault. They had destroyed her just to get to me. They had burned her life to the ground. My rage became something new. It became precise. I was no longer just going to end the Scarpa nephews. I was going to erase them. I was going to salt the earth where their houses stood. I was going to burn their memories from the face of the city, just as they had burned this shop. I reached out and put my hands on her shoulders. She was shaking so hard she was vibrating. "Pole," I said, using a name I hadn't used for anyone in my life. "Poppy, listen to me." She looked up at me. Her eyes were empty. "You are coming with me," I said. It was not a request. "You are never coming back here. This is over." My cat." She sobbed, a raw, ugly sound that tore through me. "I will buy you 100 cats," I said, my voice harsh. I pulled her, resisting against my chest, turning her away from the ruin. "I will buy you 1,000, but you are done here." I half-carried, half-dragged her to the SUV. I put her in the back. She curled into a ball, still clutching that broken, dead plant. She didn't make a sound for the entire ride. I brought her in through the front door. The staff stared. Sophia, the cook, crossed herself. I took her upstairs, not to the east wing. I took her to my wing, to the suite that adjoined my own, separated by a single, solid oak door. It was for my wife. if I'd ever been foolish enough to have one. "You will stay here," I said, pushing the door open. It was as gray and sterile as the rest of my house. She walked in like a ghost and sat on the edge of the bed. She put the broken pot on the nightstand. She started. "Shower," I ordered, my voice rough. "Clean yourself. I will have Sophia bring you food." I left. I locked the main door to her suite from the outside. I stood in my own bedroom, separated from her by a few feet of plaster and wood. I could hear nothing. I waited. An hour. I heard the shower. I heard it stop. I could not sleep. I could not work. I was a panther in a cage, to use her own words. I was reeling. The smell of the fire was in my nose. The sight of her empty, soot-stained face was burned into my brain. 3 hours later, 1 a.m. I was in my kitchen, pouring a glass of whiskey I didn't want. I heard a sound. I turned. She was standing in the doorway. She'd found the other door, the one that led from her suite past my own to the main hall. She was wearing one of my shirts, a black button-down shirt that hung on her like a dress, the sleeves rolled up a dozen times. Her legs were bare. Her hair was damp, curling around her face. She looked wrecked. She looked beautiful. She was still holding the dead plant. I can't sleep," she whispered. The room it's too quiet. It's gray," I finished. "It's cold." She nodded, her eyes welling up again. He's really gone. Barnaby, I hate you." The words hit me. "I know." You did this," she cried, her voice cracking. They did this because of you, my shop, my cat, my life." She took a step, and her composure broke. She was furious. This wasn't the broken, hollow girl from the sidewalk. This was the gardener. This was Poppy. "You and your mausoleum and your garden and your control. You murderer." She was on me now, hitting my chest with her small, clenched fists. It was nothing. It was like being hit by rain. You killed him. You killed everything." I grabbed her wrists, hard. I stopped her. "Yes," I said, my voice a snarl. I am a murderer. I am a killer. I am everything you say." I pulled her hard against me. Her body, soft and warm in my shirt, collided with mine. "And you are here. You are not a ghost. You are not ashes. You are alive. And you are mine." "I am not yours," she shrieked, struggling. "You are," I growled. "You have been since you fell into that church. You clutter. I hate you," she cried. But her eyes were telling a different story. The tension, the wire, it was snapping. "Hate me then," I whispered, my voice dropping. I was lost. I couldn't. The smell of her shampoo, the heat of her skin. "Dante," she whispered, her fight. "I told you to stop saying my name," I rasped, my mouth hovering over hers. "Why?" she breathed. "Because," I said. and I kissed her. It wasn't a kiss. It was an exorcism. It was a collision. It was all the pent-up rage, the garden, the mud, the threat, the fire, all of it exploding. It was not gentle, it was not soft, it was furious. It was possession. I grabbed her, one hand tangling in her damp hair, yanking her head back, the other arm banding around her small waist, lifting her, pinning her against the cold, marble kitchen island. She was kissing me back. Her mouth was as desperate, as angry, as hungry as mine. Her hands, no longer fists, were in my hair, pulling me closer. That damned plant pot she'd been holding fell from her grasp. It shattered on the floor, soil and broken terracotta everywhere. Neither of us cared. I broke the kiss, only to slam my mouth against the side of her throat, against the pulse that was hammering there. A frantic, beautiful, living thing. "You're mine, Poppy," I growled, the words ripped from my chest. They were right about that. You are mine. She just gasped, her fingers digging into my shoulders, her head falling back, giving me more. It wasn't a surrender. It was a merging. The fire had burned her old life away, and I, God help me, was her new one. And I was never, ever letting her go.
Chapter 9. Poppy. I woke up to the smell of him. It wasn't cologne, it was Dante. Clean soap, a trace of metal, and something darker, warmer. Him. I wasn't in the guest room. I wasn't in my apartment, which no longer existed. I was in his bed. The room was a darker, more dangerous version of the rest of the house. Charcoal walls, black sheets that felt indecent against bare skin, a platform bed, massive and modern. I was wearing his shirt. Nothing else. My body ached, not from the garden, not in a bad way. It was the ache of being claimed, fully, roughly, completely. Last night hadn't been soft, it hadn't been sweet. It had been need and grief and fury colliding. It was a storm, a surrender. We hadn't made love, we had survived each other. The broken flower pot was still on the kitchen floor when he carried me away from it. I hadn't cared. I sat up. The spot beside me was cold. Of course he was gone. He was probably doing something terrifying, or something boring. I didn't know. A pang hit me. Sharp and sudden. Fear? Regret? Number. Just the emptiness of after. Of not knowing what came next. Then the door opened. He stood there, barefoot, in sweatpants and a plain gray shirt. His hair was a mess. He looked like a man, not a capo, not a shadow. A man. He was holding 2 cups of coffee. My traitorous heart jumped. He crossed the room, silent, steady, and handed me one of the mugs. Strong. Black. "Good morning, Poppy," he said, voice low, warm, different. "Hi," I rasped. He sat on the edge of the bed, not touching, just near, watching me with something that looked a lot like curiosity, or caution. "I had Marco take care of the kitchen," he said. The pot. Barnaby's pot. Grief cracked through me. "Oh," I said, small. His jaw tensed. He put down his mug. Reached out. Not to my face, to my knee. His hand rested there, steady, possessive. "I'm sorry." "About your cat," he said. The words sounded foreign in his mouth, stiff, careful. "It was a casualty. It won't be the last. But you're safe. I'll keep it that way." He meant it. All of it. I nodded. I drank the coffee, and for a moment in his bed, wrapped in his scent, with his hand on my skin, I felt safe. The days that followed felt unreal. A honeymoon, a beautiful, twisted illusion. I was his. Fact. I lived in his wing, slept in his bed. He was always there, not distant, present. He'd wake before me. I'd hear the shower. Then he'd appear, damp and shirtless, and just look at me. Until I moved. Until I blushed. Get up, Fiorellino. You're burning daylight. I worked the garden, my sanity, my tether to who I was. But even there, he'd show up, coffee in hand, watching, silently. That's inefficient, he'd say. It's a rosebush, Dante, I'd mutter. Not a spreadsheet. Persuade faster, he'd reply, eyes never on the plant. Then he'd kiss me, in the dirt, without caring. He was always touching me, a hand on my lower back, a brush of fingers at dinner. Quiet, constant claims. He talked, too, about the garden, about foxgloves. Poisonous, I said. He smiled. Good. Plant more. It was ridiculous. It was terrifying. I was happy. And then it ended. It happened in the kitchen. Sophia was baking. She'd warmed to me. Saw me as the reason Dante was no longer a ghost. I tried to steal a biscotti. She smacked my hand. For Mr. Dante, she scolded. He hasn't had an appetite in years. Now he eats. Tu sei la sua medicina. I blushed. Took one anyway. She smiled. This house was a tomb. Since his mother. And then the war. War. Business with the Scarpas. Bad years. So much anger. He was a ghost. She chuckled. Then you. You're funny. Funny. The funeral, she laughed. The pink flowers. You, birthday flowers. For that pig Scarpa. Dio mio. It was a joke from God. I smiled, uneasy. Mr. Dante, she continued. He hadn't laughed in years. But that, he laughed. Of course, it was his joke. The words struck. My hand froze. What do you mean? His joke? She kept chopping, oblivious. You know. He finishes it. He ends the war. And you decorate the casket. The celebration on top. My blood turned to ice. Sophia, I said, barely breathing. What do you mean he finished it? She stopped. He ended the problem with Mr. Scarpa. It was mercy. Quick. 2 nights before the funeral. 2 nights. Before the funeral I ruined. The flowers, I put pink birthday flowers on a coffin. Of the man Dante had killed. The cookie turned to ash. I dropped it. I ran. Found him in his office. On the phone, laughing. He saw me, smiled, warmly. Poppy, he said. Hold on. He set the phone down. What's wrong, Fiorellino? You look like you saw a ghost. I was shaking. Did you kill him? I asked. Quiet. Cold. His smile didn't falter. Kill who, Poppy? The man in the casket. Don Scarpa. The smile vanished. The warmth disappeared. The mask dropped. He didn't move. Didn't blink. Just stared. He didn't lie. He didn't need to. I saw it. In his eyes, he had. My Dante. My broken, sharp-edged miracle. The man who touched me like I was holy. He killed him. The honeymoon hadn't shattered. It had never been real. I wasn't sleeping with a Mafia boss. I was sleeping with a killer.
Chapter 10. Dante. The smile on my face didn't just fade, it shattered. Poppy was in the doorway of my office, her face as pale as one of her damned lilies. She was trembling, her green eyes wide and horrified, not with the terror I'd seen after the firebombing, but with a new, hollow sickness. It was a look of pure moral revulsion, and it was aimed at me. "What's wrong, Fiorellino? You look like you saw a ghost." The words had left my mouth before I'd processed her expression. They were the words of the man I had been for the last week, the man who woke up with her scent in his sheets, the man who sought her out in the garden. Her question, when it came, was a whisper. Did you kill him?" My hand, still resting on the receiver of my phone, tightened. The executive I'd been speaking to, some fool from the shipping consortium, was still talking. "Hold on," I'd said, my voice warm. Now, that warmth felt like a lie. She didn't waver. The man in the casket, Don Scarpa. The mask didn't just return, it slammed down. The cold, Arctic stillness that was my true self, the self I'd been since my mother died, reclaimed its territory. The man on the phone was still babbling. I hung up. I didn't care. The silence in the office was absolute, broken only by the frantic, shallow breaths she was taking. Who? That was my first thought. Not what, but who? Who had breached my security? Who had spoken? Sophia, it had to be, the kitchen, the old fool and her sentimental loose tongue. I would have her fired. Number, I would have her tongue cut out. Number. I wouldn't. Because Poppy liked her. This spiral of thought, this infuriating, complex equation that now governed my life, took less than a second. "You're shaking," I said. My voice was flat, devoid of all the warmth she was used to. "Don't," she whispered, a tear finally breaking free and tracing a path down her pale cheek. "Don't do that. Don't be you. The boss. Just tell me." She was asking for the truth. I had told her, in the mud, that I hated lies. She was holding me to it. The trap was a perfect one. Yes. The word was a single, clean bullet. I watched it hit her. Her whole body jerked, as if she'd been physically struck. She made a sound, a small, strangled gasp, and her hand flew to her mouth. She was looking at me, at my hands, resting on the desk. The hands that had held her. The hands that had... "Oh God," she breathed. "Oh my God. You." "This is not a surprise, Poppy." I stood up slowly. I was Il Capo. I would not be judged in my own office. What did you think I did? What did you think this was? A corporation? An import-export business? I thought... I knew. It was abstract, she cried, the words tearing out of her. I knew you were dangerous. But that funeral, you let me decorate a murder. I let you? I moved around the desk. She flinched, taking a step back. That flinch, it lit a fuse of cold, black rage in my gut. I didn't let you do anything. You fell. You happened. You were a joke. A beautiful, chaotic insult to a man who deserved it. He was a person. "He was a pig!" I roared, the control finally snapping. The executioner was here. "He was a butcher! He put a bomb in my father's car. He killed my uncle. He tried to kill me. Twice!" I was in front of her now, my hands clenched at my sides. "This world, it's not yours. You think it's gardening and sunflowers, but it's not. It's this. It's blood. It's dirt. It's survival." "So you murdered him," she sobbed. So I ended a war, I corrected, my voice dropping hard and cold as steel. It was him or me. And in my world, Poppy, it will always be me. She stared at me, her face a mask of ruin. The honeymoon, as she'd probably thought of it, was over. She saw me, the monster. I can't, she whispered. I can't be here. I can't breathe. I am sleeping with a monster. She turned, her movements jerky, frantic. She was leaving. She was running. I am going, she said, her voice hollow. You can't keep me here. I won't be your prisoner. She fumbled with the door handle. You're not going anywhere. You can't stop me, she cried, yanking the door open. Are you going to kill me too? Is that what you do to problems? That word, problem. It hit me. I moved. Fast. I slammed the door shut. My arm barred her way. She was trapped between me and the wood, her body vibrating with terror. I am not your problem, Poppy, I breathed, my face inches from hers. You are not my enemy. Then let me go. I can't. Why? She shrieked. Why not? Because if you walk out that door, I said, my voice a deadly rasp, you won't make it to the end of the street. She froze. Her eyes searched mine. She was looking for the lie. She would not find one. What are you talking about? She whispered. The Scarpas? You ended them. You said it was over. I ended the dawn, I corrected. I broke their leadership. But a family like that has roots. It has nephews. It has cousins. It has rats that are starving and angry. I put my other hand on the door, caging her in. The scent of her fear was maddening. They saw you, Poppy, I explained, as if to a child. At the funeral. At the shop. They know you are here. They know you are mine. I am not yours. You are, I roared, my control gone. To them. You are not a florist. You are not Poppy. You are the whore who desecrated their uncle's grave. You are the thing that Dante Volpe keeps in his bed. You are not a person to them. You are leverage. You are a message. You are my weakness. The color drained from her face. The truth was worse than she thought. If you leave this house, I whispered, my forehead pressing against hers, they will take you. And what they will do to you before they kill you will make what I did to Scarpa look like a mercy. They will break you to hurt me. She was crying, not loudly, just silent, hopeless tears. She was trapped. So you see, Fiorellino, I murmured, my rage cooling into a cold, hard resolve. You can't leave. You can hate me. You can call me a monster. You can scream and fight, but you will do it from inside this house. You will stay safe. You will stay alive. Because you are mine to protect. Even from yourself. I pulled her against me. Her body was limp. She didn't fight. She didn't embrace me. She just existed. I had won. I had her. But as I held her trembling, broken body, I felt a coldness that had nothing to do with my rage. She was here. She was safe. But I had lost her. I had killed the light I had wanted so desperately to keep.
Chapter 11. Poppy. The house had become a tomb again, but this time I was the ghost. It had been 4 days since the confrontation in his office, 4 days of a suffocating, silent Cold War. I hadn't seen Dante. Not really. I'd feel his presence in the house, a shift in the atmosphere, a heavy stillness that meant he was near. But he was keeping his word. He was protecting me, even from himself. I ate my meals alone in my room, or rather, Sophia brought them up on a tray. I'd see her face, etched with worry and a deep, profound guilt, and I'd just nod. I couldn't even speak to her. She was the one who had, in her own way, set me free, and in doing so had shown me the bars of my cage. I was his prisoner. A well-fed, well-dressed, perfectly safe prisoner in a multi-million-dollar mausoleum, but a prisoner nonetheless. The only place I felt sane, the only place I felt like Poppy, was in the garden, and more specifically, in the greenhouse. It was my sanctuary, and as it turned out, my armory. Dante's men, Marco included, watched me from a distance. They had orders. I was not to be left alone. I was not to get near the main gate. I was the glass sculpture that could shatter at any moment. They watched me, their faces impassive as I dug in the dirt, my movements furious and frantic. I was trying to bury myself in the earth to forget the man who owned it. This morning I was in the greenhouse, working on a project. My own project. In one corner I had my experiments. I was a botanist at heart, and I loved hybridization. I was growing a patch of ghost peppers, the kind that could strip paint. Sophia had been curious about them, but I'd told her they were for a new organic pesticide, which wasn't entirely a lie. I was creating a spray. A concoction of concentrated capsaicin oil, so potent I had to wear thick rubber gloves and safety goggles to handle it, mixed with a tincture from a plant I'd been carefully cultivating. Dendrocnide moroides, the jimpy, or stinging bush. It was one of the most painfully toxic plants in the world. Its tiny, silica-like hairs delivered a neurotoxin that felt, as one survivor put it, like being burned by hot acid and electrocuted at the same time. I'd told myself I was making it for the spider mites that were infesting the citrus trees, but as I poured the viscous, angrily red and green tinged liquid into a high-pressure 2-gallon pump sprayer, a darker, colder part of me, a part I hadn't known existed until I'd slept with a murderer, knew the truth. I was making it because it felt good to create something just as dangerous as the world I'd been forced into. I was so focused on my work, on the chemical burn of the fumes, that I didn't hear it at first. It was a thud, not a gunshot. A heavy, dull thud, like a body hitting the wall of the estate. I froze. I pulled my goggles up, my heart suddenly a cold, hard stone in my chest. Silence. I told myself it was nothing. A branch falling. Then a scream. Not a man's, a peacock. Dante, in his infinite weird coldness, had peacocks on the grounds. The scream was cut short. My blood turned to ice. I looked out the glass panes of the greenhouse. One of Dante's men, a young one, I think his name was Leo, was on the main path, his gun drawn. He was shouting into his radio. He never finished the sentence. Something moved in the trees. A shadow. And then Leo was on the ground. 2 more shadows dressed in black were on him. This wasn't real. The Scarpa family, they will take you. Dante's words. I was going to be sick. I backed away from the glass, my hands fumbling with the nozzle of my sprayer. My weapon. The glass door of the greenhouse exploded. It didn't shatter. It was kicked in, a boot sending a spray of safety glass and potting soil everywhere. 2 men spilled in. They weren't Dante's men. They were grimy. They were wearing black. And they were smiling. Well, 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 one of them, a big, greasy man with a pockmarked face, said. His eyes roamed over me. Look what we found, eh? Dante's little flower. The other one, skinny and twitchy, held up a phone. That's her. That's the one. The putana from the funeral. She's prettier up close, Greasy said, taking a step toward me. He had a gun, but it was hanging at his side. He was in no rush. The boss, he said to break her. Make it slow. Make it loud. I was paralyzed. This was it. I was Poppy. Clumsy, stupid, flower-obsessed Poppy. I was nothing. Please, I whispered. My voice was a nothing. Please, don't. Oh, she begs. Twitchy cackled, his phone now recording. This is gonna be great. The boss is gonna love this. Greasy lunged. He grabbed my arm, his fingers like steel clamps. Come here, Fiorellino. We're gonna replant you. And the fear, it ignited. It wasn't just fear. It was rage. It was the rage of losing my shop. It was the rage of losing Barnaby. It was the rage of being trapped, of being called a whore. I am a gardener, I screamed. It wasn't a plea, it was a war cry. As he yanked me forward, I grabbed the pump handle of my sprayer. I twisted it, hard, and jammed the nozzle right in his face. He was laughing. He thought it was water. I squeezed the trigger. A high-pressure, cone-shaped mist of pure, agonizing hell erupted from the nozzle. The concoction, the capsaicin, the dendrichnide, hit him square in the eyes, the mouth, the nose. His scream was not human. It was a shriek of agony. He let go of me. He clawed at his face, his gun clattering to the floor. My eyes! D.I.O., my eyes! It burns! Twitchy fumbled for his gun. He was shocked. I wasn't. I was alive. I turned the sprayer on him. I sprayed his face, his hands, his neck. He gargled. He fired his gun. The bullet went wild, shattering a row of terracotta pots above my head. I just kept spraying. I emptied the tank on them. Both of them. They were writhing on the floor of my greenhouse, screaming, convulsing, tearing at their skin. They weren't men. They were insects. And I was the exterminator. The noise was horrible. I dropped the sprayer. I was breathing in the fumes. My own lungs were burning. I backed away. I tripped over a bag of mulch. I fell. And that was when he appeared. The broken doorway was filled with him. Dante. He wasn't a man. He was the executioner. He was in his suit. But his jacket was gone. His sleeves were rolled up. He was holding a gun. His eyes weren't cold. They were black holes of fury. He took in the scene. Me, on the floor, covered in dirt, hyperventilating. The two men, writhing and screaming in a pool of mud and my concoction. His eyes widened. Just a fraction. He looked at the pump sprayer. He looked at me, and, God help me, he looked impressed. The greasy man groaned, Boss, please, help. Me. Dante didn't hesitate. He didn't ask questions. Bang, bang. The noise was deafening in the glass house. The screaming stopped. There was just silence. He walked past the bodies. He didn't look at them. He came to me. He reached down. He pulled me up. His grip was iron. Are you hurt? He rasped, his voice not human. I shook my head. Poppy. He breathed. He looked at the carnage I had made. What is that? Pesticide. I choked out. His mouth twitched. Go, he ordered. His head snapped up. He heard it. More gunfire. From the house. Go to the kitchen. Go to the cellar. Lock it. Do not come out. Marco is there. Go, now. He pushed me toward the broken door. Dante, I whispered. He kissed me. It wasn't a kiss. It was a brand. It tasted of gunpowder and rage. Go, he growled. He pushed me out. He didn't follow. He turned back toward the house. He wasn't running. He was hunting. I ran. I ran as fast as I could. I ran for the house, my lungs burning from my own poison, the sound of a war raging behind me. I didn't look back.
Chapter 12. Dante. The fight was imprecise. That was the only word for it. It was not a clean, surgical operation. It was a fucking mess. The new Scarpa brood, in their infinite, idiotic rage, had thrown everything they had at the gates, hoping to overwhelm me with sheer numbers. They had failed. It cost me. I'd lost 4 men. Leo, the young one, he was gone. 3 others, they would live. But the house, my mausoleum, it was scarred. Bullet holes stitched the marble walls. A 16th century tapestry was in ruins. And there was so much blood. Not all of it was theirs. My left shoulder throbbed, a hot, wet fire where a bullet had grazed me, tearing through my shirt and a half-inch of skin. I ignored it. The house was finally silent. My remaining men were moving through the rooms, a quiet, professional cleanup crew, checking for any last vestiges of the infestation. But my focus was singular. My entire being was a compass needle pointing one way. Poppy. I walked, my gun still in my hand, my knuckles split and bloody through the kitchen. It was untouched, save for an overturned chair. I stalked toward the cellar. My rage was gone, burned away, leaving something cold and sharp in its place. Fear. Not for me, for her. What had she seen? What had she done? My mind kept replaying the scene in the greenhouse. The 2 men, heavies, seasoned Scarpa street soldiers, writhing on the floor, screaming, their faces melting, and her, standing there with that sprayer. She had made a chemical weapon. And then she had watched. As I'd put 2 bullets in their heads, she had seen me. Not Dante, the man who brought her coffee. She had seen the executioner, the monster she had accused me of being. And after seeing that, how could she ever look at me again? I reached the cellar door. It was solid oak, locked from the inside. "Marco," I said, my voice a rasp. I heard movement, the sound of a heavy bar being lifted, the click of a deadbolt. The door swung open. Marco was there, his own gun raised, his face pale but resolute. He relaxed when he saw me lowering the weapon. "Boss, you're hurt." "It's a scratch," I said, my eyes scanning past him. The cellar was full. Sophia was in the corner, clutching her rosary, her lips moving in a silent, frantic prayer. 2 other kitchen staff were with her, wide-eyed. And then I saw her. She was sitting on a wine crate, her back rigid. She was still covered in mud and greenhouse filth. Her face was streaked with tears and dirt. Her knuckles were white. She wasn't holding a rosary. She was holding one of Sophia's cast-iron pans, a heavy one. She was holding it like a bat, her eyes fixed on the doorway, ready to swing. She was magnificent. She saw me. Her eyes, wide and green and wild, took all of me in. The blood on my shirt, the gash on my shoulder, the kill still in my eyes. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She just lowered the pan. Slowly. Her arms were shaking. I stepped into the cellar. "It's over." My voice echoed in the small space. Sophia burst into a loud, sobbing grazie a Dio, but I didn't look at her. I walked to Poppy. I didn't care who was watching. I reached out my clean hand, not the one holding the gun, and tucked a stray, dirt-caked curl behind her ear. She flinched. My hand stopped. The flinch. It was a knife in my gut. "Poppy," I said, my voice low. Are they?" she whispered. "Gone," I said. "All of them. The house is clear. The family is gone." I wasn't just talking about the attackers. I was talking about the root. In the past 2 hours, while she'd been in the cellar, my men across the city had been pruning. The Scarpa family was no longer a problem. They were extinct. "Okay," she whispered. She was in shock. "Let's go," I said. I holstered my gun, my movements stiff. "Let's get you clean." I helped her up. She was unsteady. She let the heavy pan clatter to the stone floor. She didn't take my hand, but she let me lead her. I took her upstairs, through the carnage, through the whispers of my men, who stared at her, not as a victim, but with a new, profound respect. They had heard about the greenhouse. I took her to my rooms. I sat her on the edge of my black-tiled shower. I turned on the water, hot enough to steam. I stripped off my own bloody, ruined shirt. I saw her eyes track the wound on my shoulder. "Dante," she said, her voice small. "It's nothing," I said. I looked at her. Her weapon. It was brilliant. The pesticide. She looked up at me, her eyes hollow. They were going to. "I know," I said. You saved yourself, Poppy." I blinded them," she whispered, her voice cracking. I heard them scream." "Good," I said, my voice hard. She needed to hear it. "They deserved to scream. You did what you had to do. You survived." I knelt in front of her, a killer kneeling to a gardener. "You are not like me, Poppy," I said, my voice raw. "You protect life, but you are not weak. You have thorns. I never wanted you to have to use them. But Dio, I am so proud that you did." A sob broke from her. It wasn't a sob of sadness. It was a sob of release. And she launched herself at me. She wrapped her muddy arms around my neck. She buried her face in my bloody shoulder, not caring about the wound, the blood. "I saw you," she cried, "in the greenhouse. You just shot them." "Yes," I whispered, holding her tight. "I did." "You are a monster, Dante," she mumbled against my skin. "I am," I agreed. I would not lie to her. Not now. Not ever. "But I am your monster." She pulled back, just enough to look at me. Her green eyes were clear. She was seeing all of me, the killer, the protector. "And I," she whispered, a tiny broken smile on her filthy face. "I am the gardener who likes poisonous things." I kissed her. It wasn't like the first time. It wasn't fury. It wasn't possession. It was a covenant. It was truth. It tasted of mud and salt and gunpowder and life. 3 weeks later. The garden was blooming. I stood on the path. The house was silent. It was clean. The scars were mended. The blood was gone. It was still a mausoleum, but it didn't feel like one. Poppy was on her knees in the dirt, in my mother's garden. It was not dead anymore. It was exploding with color, with life. She had done it. She had brought it back. She was humming. She was wearing my shirt again, and not much else. I walked up behind her. She didn't flinch. She knew my step. She leaned back on her heels, wiping a smudge of dirt from her nose. "You're late," she teased. "I was working," I murmured. "Murdering?" she asked. Her tone was light, but the question was real. "No," I said. "Shipping. Today." She smiled. She trusted me. She knew who I was, and she was still here. "Good," she said. "I need help with this hydrangea. It's stubborn." I looked at the blooms. They were blue. "You changed them," I said. "They used to be pink." "I changed the soil," she said, her eyes bright. "I added acid." They changed with it. People do that. They adapt to the ground they're planted in. I looked at her. My clumsy florist. My beautiful, deadly poppy. She had adapted to my ground, and she had changed me. I knelt in the dirt, in my suit. I didn't care. "I am still a killer, Poppy," I whispered. "I know," she whispered back. "But I am done letting the darkness in." I looked at her, at the sunlight in her hair. "You are the only light I will allow." She smiled. She leaned in. She kissed me. "Well, good," she murmured against my lips. "Because this garden, it needs a lot of sun, and I am not going anywhere." I pulled her up from the dirt. I lifted her into my arms, and I carried her back into the house. It was still my fortress, but this time it was home.